concerns arising from the 2023 general election, particularly with issue of election technology, talk of IREF. My colleagues, as usual, are with me on this program. We have Uju Eje, we have Shola Jasimi, and indeed Mustafa Mohammed. Welcome to the program.
Thank
INEC says it will conduct a mock election because part of the reasons it gave for the failure of IREF for presidential election was that it did not conduct a nationwide mock elections to test IREF, its reliability across the nation. It only did for federal constituencies, and so they ran into problem. Perhaps to prevent a recurrence of such problems, INEC has said this time around, not just for IREF, not just for its technology, but for the entire processes of accreditation, voting, and also transmission of results.
I think that INEC, if well intended, is in the right. I mean, anything that would guarantee credible, fair elections is what Nigerians are seeking. If everything is aimed at ensuring that the process goes without all the glitches that are yet to be explained to Nigerians, without all the glitches of 2023, then it is good. Let them test the equipment, let them test the technology so that we don't hear strange English after the 2027 English. So let them go ahead, but let it not be the other way. Some persons have said some funny things between yesterday and today, but again, I think there's really nothing wrong in that if it will help improve the electoral process.
Well, Mr. Professor Josh Amukbuto and all his team, national commissioners, recs, administrative secretaries in all the states, local government, electoral officers, all of them who have a responsibility at this time, whose all eyes will be on them as they continue this process towards the general elections, and know that they need to get the support of Nigerian people. So everything that needs to be done so that we don't have these glitches. The other person who was there before Amukbuto, Professor Mahmoud Yakubu, he's now Nigeria's ambassador in Qatar or somewhere here. He's done his own part. He spoke about the glitches. So Professor Yakubu shouldn't ride on that kind of glitch. Do everything you need to do. That ICT department.
He promised while he was being screened.
That's what, by the Senate.
Glitches will be a thing of the past.
Beautiful. So we're going to hold him by what he has said, because his predecessor also said everything is ready.
He made several promises.
True. So as we look at all of them, because all eyes will be on Prof, who is the one at the helm of affairs, he has the commissioners, the Department for ICT, I want to say it with all sense of responsibility, whoever the current director is, even his name now, we should know it, Nigeria should be familiar, so that we can begin to call him Mr. Lagbaja. Sir?
He's a pastor.
Even if he's an imam, the responsibility is on him now that all your ICT skills, yourself and all your lieutenants, if you're going to have consultants in ICT, in AI, whatever, ensure that you do the needful. So I'm going to find out his name so that I can be mentioning his name regularly on the program, Mr. So-and-so.
You want to put him under pressure?
Not under pressure. In the spotlight. When someone is an actor, you don't want you to be in the back where the clear lights won't be on you. You want to put those lights on you so that you know that, everybody is looking at what I'm doing. I need to get the job done.
Most times it's not the personality. It's about capacity.
Can you detach personality from capacity?
Definitely. You can love somebody so much like the late Muhammad Buhari, and you put him in there, you spent 8 years and you didn't fulfill your promises. But
it was said that he had integrity, but no capacity.
And then a lot of people stole money, like Malami, whose property were confiscated by the court.
They didn't say he stole money. The legal terms is that the properties were acquired not through legal means. So That's what they
see. English is a beautiful language.
said.
Doctor, English is a beautiful language.
Yes.
You can use several other nomenclatures. You can even put icing on the dung of a cow. And
You know, we can only say he's
But let me digress from
after a criminal conviction. That was a simple matter.
when you have a final forfeiture of properties, something led to that. So let's not forget about that.
Yes,
but
when
let's not go
the
beyond.
criminal matter is still on. Let's wait for it.
He can appeal against the final forfeiture, but we shouldn't digress from what we are discussing. When we are talking about capacity, it's not the personality of being sheikh, pastor, imam, bishop, deacon, this and that. That does not matter. Even Amopiton, the senior advocate of Nigeria, a professor, a lecturer, that does not make you a proficient and efficient electoral administrator. With all the doubts about his personality, whether he can do it right or not, he had the time to prove to Nigerians. I don't believe in promises of political appointees or politically exposed appointees and others. Nigeria had several elections in the past 30, 40 years. The June 12th election was the most credible in recent years. If you think that period in the 90s to date is closer to us now. Therefore, Nigerians are looking for who will actually beat the record of the June 12th election in terms of credibility. We have seen these electronic machines fail. It has even failed the former President Goodluck Jonathan because he doesn't care who is there. Secondly, those machines must be tested. It's not about
This is Beavers now.
Yeah.
That was Cat Reader, and we are told that Beavers is an improvement
It's
on Cat
not
Reader.
an SSC or WIPE or NECO that you start talking about, or IJMB that you start talking about mock election. Are you going to shut down the entire country with its economy and whatever because you want to carry
No,
out
they
a
won't do
mock
that.
election?
Just select
So what I'm
areas.
saying is that, number one, the kind of machines we are procuring. Number two, which network are you going to use? Are you going to use the current service providers that have gone worse from the bad, that the NCC has gone to sleep? Even in parts of Abuja, some of these networks cannot work for data and voice call. Somebody cannot hear you.
Or
they are
should we
going
rely on satellite?
Or are you going to bring Starlink all over to provide services? I'm saying this because Nigerians cannot afford to have a very bad election. I also hope and wish that the NCC boss is hearing. I'm surprised the president have not fired him for not forcing those service providers to give us.
Dr. Mewada?
Yes, it doesn't matter who his name is.
No, I'm saying that in public office, let's attach names to those offices. It helps us.
You see, for over 6 months, we are having very bad networks. And now election is
You want to
happening.
heap all the blame on the head of the chief executive of the NCC?
Exactly.
You don't think it's beyond him?
How?
Okay.
See, you are regulating these people. They even had town halls in the past to hear from beneficiaries.
Consumers, yeah.
But what happened in the past 6 months? Just travel to Cotonou, Togo, Niger, our neighbors here, or even Chad. As poor as some of these countries are, their networks is superb.
So what INEC can learn, because it's a learning curve, and I love what INEC is doing. Because when they said they are going to test their processes to not just integrity, the stress test.
Yes.
It tells you that indeed the commission is on the right track. Because like I said earlier, the IREV was not subjected to nationwide tests before 2023. So they are going to the technology, all of them, Beavers, IREV, name it, then the processes. But more importantly, what about the personnel? That's why I was happy
But
when
your department-
this issue of integrity and character and competence came in. Because if you have capacity and you don't have integrity, it amounts to naught. Or you have integrity, you don't have capacity, it also amounts to naught. Now, INEC in this exercise must also ensure that as it's going through this mock process, it has to study the attitude, the character of its personnel. Because that I know is not just INEC, there will be ad hoc staff.
Yeah.
They have to factor it in, because one person, one personnel can torpedo the entire process. They've not told us what really caused the glitch in 2023. They have not told us at what point did they occur, with a view to identify who was responsible.
Point.
And what mistake INEC must avoid going forward is this period of, if there's any infraction by his personnel, they will promise they will investigate, and after that it ends.
No
they
conviction.
They don't
Exactly.
come out. You raised it
tell
yesterday.
Nigerians exactly
The outcome
the
of the investigation, now, who did what and what punishments were meted out.
But you see, there's something that the INEC has not been talking about. One recurring dismal in most of the recent elections is about logistics. You always find places where those electoral materials don't get there on time. When other places have finished accreditation, the voters are voting, some people are still waiting. What about this logistics? In the past, we have, in the logistics, even the Air Force delivering sensitive material, they have been warehoused on arrival at the central banks of Nigeria, and so many other efforts, other agencies are also helping. But this recurrent dismal, have they studied why electoral materials have not been arriving in some places on time? What did they plan to do about these things? And then the background check on many other ad hoc officials they are bringing in beyond the youth corps members. We've done several elections since 1999. I used to ask myself questions. Why is it that we find it difficult to get it right most times? It's just like the Hajj Commission that every year people go to Hajj. Every year you find problems of flight, people being abandoned.
And every election cycle, you see problems of late arrival of electoral materials. And it's not just a problem of logistics. You know of suppression of votes. Sometimes it's intentional. Sometimes it's institutional.
Sabotage.
To delay the arrival of electoral materials and officials in an area that a certain candidate or a certain political party
Let me give
is
you-
dominant, to suppress votes there.
Let me give you one funny example that happened in your state, Anambra State. One of the kingpins of Anambra politics, in fact, the most popular one, I won't mention the name here, was contesting that election. And so they said they would give him his own treatment. Do you know that electoral materials did not appear in his own polling booth until around 2 in the afternoon? 2 p.m. before they had electoral materials, and just 1 hour to end the process. And
Yes, by 2. If by 2 you're not on the queue, you're not supposed to.
And that was when the electoral
INEC extends.
this one, I was there. That was near Peter, after Peter Obi's area. I think Oga or something, that area. I was there, so it's not like somebody told me. And then these things happen. You find that most times these things are also orchestrated by politicians. You find some of these ad hoc stuff are also planted by politicians, and they do these things, in arrangement with some, of the officials, of course, who are not straightforward. So we have this, and you may also expect it in some other elections. And as we were talking, the issue of integrity in whatever we do, in whatever methods we adopt, in whatever equipment we use, is what should be foremost in this 2027
And beyond
elections.
that,
having integrity. Integrity of the process must be ensured. As he was talking and mentioned Professor Mahmoud Yakub, I remembered, the promises. He kept promising and repeating promises. And I just remembered Macbeth, if you did literature, where, the witches now came to Macbeth. When Macbeth was so confident, and they said that about, and he said, accursed be the tongue that tells me so, for it has cowed my better part of man, and be these juggling fiends no more believed, that potter with us in a double sense, that speak the word of promise to our hearts and break it to our
Wow,
hope.
what a memory.
Yes, I tend to remember some of these things. So they speak the word of promise to our hearts and break it to our hope. And that is what we have seen over time. Everyone comes and promises excellent process. And what do we get at the end of the day? Excuses.
So what we need to do, like those of us who are in the media, we need to spotlight officers at various levels. We know that Professor Mukpiton is the one at the helm. national commissioners who will be deployed to the various geopolitical zones. I think they have 12 national commissioners, the state recs, administrative secretaries, local government officers who are in charge of the various local governments. These are persons that, as much as possible, the media must begin to put a face to them. Shola Jaisimi, Ikorodu, local government area electoral officer for INEC. We put the face there so that we know. So that when you perform well, we will give you the kudos, we'll tick you. If you don't perform well, the Nigerian people, that constituency, they know who you are. I'm not calling it a name and shame strategy, but I'm going to say, look, we put you out there so that you can get the props and you know that, look, I need to do my best as somebody who has been given an assignment by this country for the votes of the people to count. Even core members, because at times you get to a polling unit, a core member who is serving this nation begins to act like as if he or she is the alpha and omega for the next 24 hours, speaking to people anyhow. And when you pick up your phone and say, look, I'm going to record what you're doing here, they pick offense. So they should, as young as they may be, because they are at least 30 years
They're part of the system. They
should
grew
be
out
less than
of the
30.
system.
Yeah, 30 and below. So we should let them realize that all eyes are on them. And the Nigerian people must be very vigilant. Anybody who wants to circumvent the process, as best as you can, because this World Cup brought something to the fore. You see someone's phone just zooming to the pitch, and it's like as if the camera is just by the pitch. So if your, your tablet, your phone, if they say official says, let your devices not be so and so, stay as far as you can, zoom into what you think is happening that is illegit, and put it out there for social media and the police to deal with. That way people will know that all eyes are on them.
And then the other question I would love to ask is, we have hundreds of thousands or even a few million in the IDP camps as a result of the social strife in the country. Whether you are talking about part of Benue, Plateau, Borno, Adamawa, Kaduna, Zamfara, Katsina State, what has the INEC done or plan to do as regards to these hundreds of thousands of voters who have been displaced? Do they have any plan to trace and make those voters be part of the next general election? Or are they going to wish them away because they are displaced? Of course, I will also have to admit the fact that the size of the country is so large. The tax before INEC is so enormous, but INEC should learn from...
Have they received all their money? Because at some point, we know from what we hear, sometimes government of the day delay transfer of funds to INEC to confer some advantages, despite the fact that INEC is on first line charge. INEC must not be begging for funds. They must never be begging for funds.
But they have always been prepared, even by the National Assembly.
What I'm trying to say is, as an institution, they can also award contracts for example, the printing of their ballot boxes, the printing of their ballot papers and what have you. These are contracts that can be awarded without even waiting for the government to pay them the money they need for logistics. That is also not an excuse that why government is not paying. And if it's a first line charge, the finance minister and the central bank governors to tell Nigerians why the monies these people need for the general election exercise has not been paid. They should not be treated like the contractors in the country who will always carry placard to the finance ministry or national assembly.
Not just placards, they are carrying coffins this time around.
Placards and coffins that they are owing banks, some
caskets,
have their companies funded up before. So we shouldn't treat the Electoral Commission that way.
So what we all need to do is also get the spotlight on, Mustafa has mentioned, the Ministry of Finance, the Office of the Accountant General of the Federation, where the money is, so that they can also give periodic updates. by the time Professor Mukpito and a couple of his commissioners get to the villa, because we know the trend, we know how these things happen, they go and brief the president, this is where we are. At times, National Assembly committees on electoral reforms and all that call them to ask how you're faring. So all of us, Nigerian people, Nigerian media, Nigerian civil society, even international civil society can also help us. Look, in all honesty, the same way, these cameras are on me now, I'm looking at it, I'm speaking, the cameras of everybody should be on all those who are involved, unless we forget the security agencies, because no matter how we do everything, logistics are in place. If they don't help the process, the people who try to
build searchlights on them.
They will like
Talking of the INEC chairman going to brief the president, as a reporter in the State House for about 10 years, I see numerous successive INEC chairmen come to brief the president. And I would think, brief a president who's a player in a contest you're going to officiate. Yes, so sometimes they come to plead for funds and all that. Should the INEC chairman not be briefing the National Assembly on Nigerians?
No.
Perhaps we have to study what the law says, what the Constitution says, what the Electoral Act says to determine the extent to which INEC, its chairman or the board, can interface with the executive who are partisan and all that.
You see, when you talk like this, it reminds us about the agitation by some people that these persons into these sensitive areas should not be appointees of the president, that they should be appointed by independent bodies or other bodies, but not those who may be directly involved in contest. People have been saying that exactly. You see, because in this case, whether they are appointees of the president or not, they need to get to the president to collect what they want. And as for the National Assembly, yes, they do come to the National Assembly. In fact, one thing the National Assembly does in any election year is to grant INEC almost every request that, in fact, it is done with fiat. They have ad hoc committees that attend to that. Anything INEC wants towards any election is granted speedily. So why the releases are not commensurate is something I do not understand.
There are some institutions that report to the National Assembly by law. Public Complaints Commission, Auditor General of the Federation, ICPC, even EFCC, they're supposed to send annual reports to the National Assembly. So we should encourage where such interface between the government and these agencies should be less with the president and more with elected representatives, because in the National Assembly you have people from different political parties as members and others. So it throws open issues of transparency and accountability. I'm talking about suppression of votes. Since 1999, whenever we cover elections, the first report from our correspondents on the field will be, late arrival of electoral materials.
Well, is it a general thing across?
It's become general.
No, because what I found out is that as we progressed with our various series of elections, the percentage with regards to late arrival has gradually reduced.
Yes, it's reducing, but there are.
It can be eliminated.
Yaga Africa did a report just after 2023 election. I will look for that report and we'll share with our listeners and viewers. They listed areas because they deploy observers and agents across the length and breadth of the country. They listed areas where materials and officials arrived late. And do you know, the place that was hard hit was the southeast. So this is an explanation INEC should give. Why should a particular region of the country witness the biggest
disappointment
of later? Are these mere coincidence, or is it a premeditated attempt to disenfranchise the people and suppress votes? These are issues we'll continue to raise. Let's go for a break. When we come back, the two judgments from Court of Appeal that appear to place direction on the Electoral Act as against the powers of INEC. We'll be deliberating on that. We also have a lawyer who has been part of one of the cases that will join us to give perspectives. Do stay with us.
The stories now break online. Don't Don't miss anything from our real-time updates and exclusive content. Follow and participate in discussions on live TV studio programs to shape the narratives. Subscribe, engage, and share from AIT.live at AIT_online on X, AIT Online on Facebook, Official AIT Live on Instagram, TikTok, and Threads on YouTube. Stay connected with AIT. On air, online, online.
Get ready for a bold new chapter in political discourse. The conversations that matter most are stepping into the spotlight like never before. Political platform, the hard-hitting, no-holds-barred program you have trusted on Raypower Radio is making a powerful move to television. Tune in to Africa Independent Television, AIT, as political platform debuts on your screen, bringing deeper analysis, sharper debates, and the voices shaping our nation's future right into your screens. From policy and politics breakdowns to real-time discussions with key stakeholders, this is more than a program. It is where opinions are tested, truths are uncovered, and the people's voice is heard. Join seasoned hosts and expert guests as they tackle the issues that define our democracy. No filters, no distractions, just real talk. Political platform now on AIT, 9 to 10 a.m. every weekday. Stay informed, stay engaged, be part of the conversation.
People, politics, and power brings context and clarity to issues and events in governance, democracy, and development. On People, Politics, and Power, we feature people who shape the events and define the issues.
A lot of the agencies are still struggling with implementation of freedom of information.
The government should come. We need Nigeria to work.
We examine the interplay and interaction of politics with power and their impact on policies and the people.
It's about getting the system to deliver the kind of electoral outcome that people will be happy with.
People, Politics, and Power with Imoni Amarere.
Will low-performing agencies be held to account? Or will the numbers fade after the headlines?
At 1 p.m. every Monday and Friday on AIT.
Gender Agenda is where policy meets people. It's a bold policy literacy platform bridging the gap between decision makers and women across every sector. From parliament to politics, from leadership to governance, from peace to economy, development, human rights, from Nigeria to the rest of Africa, Gender Agenda amplifies voices too often excluded, ensuring every voice counts. Through compelling storytelling, social impact dialogue, thought-provoking documentaries, town halls that lean on data and research, we raise the bar. Gender Agenda, every Friday, 4:30 p.m. on AIT and on AIT's YouTube channel live. My name is Adora Sidney Jack, and this is Gender Agenda. Gender Agenda. Women rising.
In the hallowed chambers where laws are forged and a nation's destiny is decided.
This is your parliamentary program, Inside the Parliament on AIT.
Voices rise, opinions clash, debates ignite.
We cannot be apologetic in the discharge of our constitutional duties as lawmakers of the Federal Republic of Nigeria.
The bodies have proven that the elections have been peacefully and in accordance with law must shift to INEC.
From the Senate to the House of Representatives, this is where policies are tested, laws are crafted, and authority is held to account.
We spoke to some lawmakers on their opinions of the document presented by the President.
Every motion, every argument carries the hopes of millions.
We need more hospitals, more health clinics in communities so that they can effectively take care of the primary health need of people.
The questions are tough. The exchanges are intense.
Mr. President, you can have your way, but I will have my say. You can use the gavel, and I will use my voice.
And those who want the proviso are 55 in number. And so the proviso says,
But who truly stands for the people? Who is driving the change that defines our tomorrow?
GTBT, whatever.
Get the answers on Where Nigeria Decides on Inside the Parliament on AIT every Tuesday, 4:30 p.m.
Thank you so much for staying with us, and apologies for the long break. We needed to get hold of our guest, Barrister Salifu Oguche Usman, who is held by traffic but is gradually making his way to the studio here. He will be weighing in on two judgments from the Court of Appeal yesterday, all in Abuja, from Abuja Division. Delivered by separate panels of the Court of Appeal in Abuja. They address different legal issues and reached different conclusions on the Electoral Act as it relates to powers of INEC to conduct the election. Where does the power of INEC end? Where does the regulation and regulatory powers and authority of INEC end? Where does the powers of the political parties start in terms of provisions in the Electoral Act and provisions of the Constitution? If you recall, the judgment delivered by Justice Adebukola Banjoko and read by Justice Ukona Bang focused on INEC's administrative powers. The court upheld the Commission's authority to issue election guidelines and timelines, ruling that INEC acted within the powers granted to it by the Constitution and the Electoral Act. It held that the courts should not interfere with INEC's administrative discretion while it acts lawfully. The second judgment, in contrast, delivered by a panel of justices led by Justice Bilkisu Aliyu, focused on constitutional rights of political parties. Okay, one talked about Electoral Act and powers of INEC to issue guidelines and, of course, flowing from administrative powers to constitutional rights of political parties by the second judgment. The Justice Aliu judgment struck down Section 75, subsection 5, 6, 7, and Section 84, subsection 2 of the Electoral Act 2006, holding that those provisions unlawfully restricted the autonomy of political parties by dictating how they should conduct their primaries and manage their membership register. So by implication, the amended Electoral Act 2026 passed by the National Assembly as far as these provisions are concerned, 77 and 84, are illegal and so should remain null and void according to the appeal court. According to the court, the Constitution, not the Electoral Act, determines the powers of political parties and qualifications for candidates. The argument is that the Constitution has already made provisions for this. Powers of political parties and qualification for candidates. So any attempt to do otherwise using the Electoral Acts is null and void, because the Electoral Act, or indeed any act of the Parliament, any law made by the Parliament, made by the National Assembly, is inferior to the Constitution, which is the ground norm.
Now, I was confused when I read the two judgments. What readily came to my mind was that all those actions undertaken by INEC and political parties which are contrary to this judgment, are they null and void? Will the parties go back to the drawing board and carry out another series of activities such as primaries? Will INEC, the judgment says INEC has the powers to run its administrative actions such as drawing timetable, fixing dates of elections, and what have you. What comes or what becomes of all the actions taken by political parties and the Independent National Electoral Commission? These judgments are confusing. They need further interpretation and explanations.
Yeah, or maybe clarification. At least when the lawyer comes in, will tell us what exactly this is all about. Because for me, it's confusing. In one breath, you're giving INEC, or retaining the powers of INEC to come up with guidelines and timelines for election and for the process.
That's
the justice, the one read by Justice Abang.
Yes,
you know, and then the one by
focused on the Electoral Act and the administrative powers of INEC. But the other one talked about some provisions of the Electoral Act that are inconsistent with the Constitution.
I know what you're talking about. I mean, sections 77 and 84.
Absolutely.
But what I am saying is, in the light of what we're looking at now, this current process, because the other judgment of the High Court was to the extent that parties are free to further extend the processes for their primaries, you know, unlike the timeline set by INEC that was restricting parties and infringing on their constitutional rights. Now, this one says INEC has the power. The other one also says the provisions in the Electoral Act is trying to infringe on the powers of political parties to freely conduct their primaries. Can't you see? I mean, there's some confusion here because in the face of the current process, you know, and the activities carried out by parties and INEC so far, there needs to be more clarification.
Yes, Mustafa Mohammed raised it.
Yes.
Which one should we rely on? For instance,
if
they say the period of nomination is this point, INEC said May 30, and they shoot down those provisions in the Electoral Act. Which one should apply now, considering that some parties still carried out nomination after that, based on the earlier High Court judgment?
Like we mentioned on the program, whatever powers INEC has, INEC can still use discretion to be able to look at certain things. The aspect of its guidelines, it's not cast in stone. INEC guidelines are subject to the Electoral Act. The Electoral Act is subject to the Constitution. So if we arrange it along this line, we know where we stand.
It makes it clearer.
Very, very clear. So even as we expect the opinion and view of our guest who is expected to join us, we should just continue to encourage the judiciary to not give conflicting judgments. In my
confusing ones.
Yes, this is not conflicting in my view. You know, I mean,
it's just an interpretation.
Exactly, and that's why
by learned minds.
And that's why we in the media must be very, very detailed and careful, because at times the pointing is coming to us that we pick a particular part and we run with that part, like as if that's what it is. So the element of balance in interpretation, we must continue to be very, very deliberate, painstaking, and getting all the sides to whatever the judgment is and pushing them out there.
For
that's
comprehension by our
by those who listen. Because
I think Shola was very right in establishing all the rules, laws, and constitutional provision. You have the Constitution, which is the ground norm. You have the Electoral Act that should flow from the Constitution. That should not deviate from the Constitution. But the court, the second appeal court judgment is saying the Electoral Act section 77 subsections and 84 with the subsections deviated from the Constitution. So it shouldn't. You also have the electoral guidelines and rules for the conduct of the election. These are administrative powers of INEC based as a regulator, which the courts, including the Supreme Court, have also told us must flow from not just the Constitution, but also the Electoral Act. If it doesn't, it's null and void. For instance, the Supreme Court said the IREV, transmission of results, is not in the Electoral Act for 2023. It was contained in the conduct and rules for election, and the court said is inferior. If you want it in our electoral system, you must infuse it into the Electoral Act. That's why attempts were made to include it during the last.
And then beyond that,
you see
but with provisor. and then those are those provisors.
Those sections that the justices knock out of the act because they are inconsistent with the provisions of the Constitution. And of course, everybody knows that any law, any provision, any act that is inconsistent with the Constitution of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, of course, is invalid to the extent of its inconsistency. You know, one thing about our laws is that They are subject to interpretations. When there are controversies, people go to the courts to get interpretations and judgment. I think what just happened at the courts should be a guiding light for the elections. The biggest problem, however, as at the moment, is the elections from the very moment now. You are talking about 4, 5, 6 months. And whatever judicial issues that we have should be able to be sorted out and then give us the guiding light that we don't have to go for election and then some pre-election matters come, some judgments are reviewed and some actions are invalidated.
Let me provide some information here. Section 77 deals with the timeline provided in the Electoral Act for political parties to submit membership register. So the court here is saying that it is not right, that it interferes with the internal affairs of the parties.
Yes.
So INEC giving a time frame for which political parties must submit their membership register, that it erodes the ability of these parties to manage their internal affairs. It doesn't remove the fact that timeline exists. They already mentioned, they already given mentions in the statutes and the Electoral Act, as it were.
Shall I said something that INEC can, even in the face of a current process, because I'm just looking at this current process, do something, but then that will be discretionary. And if INEC does anything that is discretionary, the parties may not have legal rights or legal muscle to challenge such action. It will just be purely discretionary. And that's why we need further interpretation, like Mustafa has said, and this interpretation has come urgently.
But it throws up one thing, Shola Jaisimi. The amendment of this Electoral Act was less of patriotism, but more of partisanship. Now, when a National Assembly makes a law and the court begins to strike them down, it raises this issue of sincerity. If you use your powers and you use your majority in the National Assembly to make laws, not for good governance and welfare of Nigeria, but for peculiar interests, then it speaks volumes about your statesmanship. But good enough, the courts are there for people who are aggrieved to challenge those obnoxious provisions.
But some other members raised objections to some of the provisions of the Electoral Act. They were in the minority. Some of them were even blacklisted because of it. I remember, did the Reti Kingibe not raise concerns? But yes, there were other lawmakers that did too. And at the end of the day, the majority had their way, and the court is now having its own way.
So that's why that aspect of contestation for seats in the National Assembly is very important. All eyes will always be on the executive positions. But there are some countries where the president doesn't even have majority in the federal legislature. And he knows he or she will have an uphill task in pushing through things that are seemingly partisan for his or her party, and things that are for his own personal, progress and all of that. So that contestation for seats in the National Assembly is what Nigerian people must also look at. When you're seemingly focused on a presidential seat, who is the president? How about the person who will represent your federal constituency in the House of Representatives? How important? Or you love the face of Mr. A, who is of so-and-so party. Then when you get to the polling unit and you're giving those 3, ballot papers, presidential, Senate, and House, you just don't print the same political party.
Shola, you're talking about...
So that's why it's important. And that's why we must have a scenario. Like in the last presidential election, I with all humility, I voted, 2 different political parties. I voted for someone else for the presidency. And in the Senate and House, I scrutinized, who are these persons? I checked their antecedents.
Do you want the bandwagon effect?
Exactly. And I voted 2 separate persons. two persons who have different political parties for the National Assembly seat and someone else for the presidency. So it's not carry go. It does
Your viewers will want to know who you voted for in the presidency. He needs to tell his viewers who he voted for. Whether he voted for Tinubu or Peter Obi. But going beyond that, the biggest question you would love to ask us most times is, how politically informed are our electorates to make very informed choices? In the past, the electorates have been voting for various people to go to the National Assembly, and those of them, once they win the vote and they relocate to Abuja, they hardly go back and engage with their electorates who are down there at the grassroots. They hardly go and discuss national issues. So basically, when they come to the National Assembly, they are looking for how they will line up their pocket, because the political offices in Nigeria are very, very attractive. The political offices, people come very poor, they make a lot of money. So I think there is need for our electorates to become politically informed. The person you sent to the National Assembly, is he there warming seats, or is he there delivering the deliverables? And has he been going back to report back to their constituencies and senatorial districts?
Well, there's something, an important point Mustafa raised earlier, and I raised it days or weeks back when the High Court delivered judgment on provisions of this Electoral Act. I said it would throw up confusion. Now, at the end of the day, which one should apply? Should we apply the law as amended? Should we apply the High Court judgment, which is now down as the Court of Appeal? When it gets to the Supreme Court and there are different coordinated positions, which to apply and when will it begin to apply? It's confusion that we have to manage.
Well, that's what our learned friend, somebody said maybe all of us are not learned. So let him tell us what it is.
Starting for Guche Usman, thank you so much for joining us. You were racing down from Makurdi this morning, where you had an appearance at the Court of Appeal yesterday.
Yes, sir.
So you were involved with this, one of these matters. Briefly tell us which of them, because there were two judgments from the Court of Appeal yesterday.
Yes, very well. I was involved in the matter that was at the Court of Appeal, the case of Don ADC against Don Obina, wherein the court was confronted with the issue of the State Congress of the ADC. A number of persons, 7 respondents.
But it appears it's different from the judgment from the Court of Appeal yesterday.
The judgment of the Court of Appeal yesterday is different from this very one that I was involved. I was involved in the appeal that came up for judgment, I think about a week ago, wherein the Court of Appeal had to decide whether the state congresses conducted by the present leadership of the African Democratic Congress were proper and should be recognized by INEC. That appeal, which was resolved by the Court of Appeal a few days ago, and that puts the issue of who is the proper state executive committee of the
African today is the judgment delivered by Justice Adebukola Banjoko, read by Justice Kona Bank. I know you have read about it. I focus on INEC's administrative powers.
Very well, sir.
So the court upheld the INEC's authority to issue election guidelines and timelines.
Very well,
Speak
sir.
to it.
Yes, I think the judgment of the Court of Appeal in that respect is in proper perspective, because INEC as an institution is backed up by the electoral law. The electoral law as it stands empowers INEC with the power to administer the provisions of the Electoral Act as well as the Constitution with respect to the electioneering processes. And in that respect, INEC is vested with the power to make regulations for the day-to-day and minute-by-minute steps to be taken by political parties, political actors, and even INEC itself. And if you take away the power to make regulations from INEC, that will create some gap, because there is not possible for the Electoral Act or even the Constitution to cover every steps, every minute action that needs to be taken by participants in the electoral process cannot be covered by the Electoral Act. So it is natural, and I think it is also proper for the Court of Appeal to have affirmed INEC's power to make regulations.
The other judgment spoke about political parties having the powers and freedom to carry out their activities without the interference of the Independent National Electoral Commission. Interference here will include asking them to present membership registered when they should do their primaries and what have you. As a lawyer, don't you think these two verdicts are contradictory? This hand is saying regulate. This hand is saying those you are regulating.
You are regulating.
Over-regulating. I think we should put them in proper perspective here. These two issues were the first issue you are talking about, internal parties affair, were also raised and resolved in the earlier issue between Don Obina and the ADC. It forms part of the judgment of the Court of Appeal.
Yes.
Okay, in that judgment, the Court of Appeal held that internal parties, internal affairs of political parties, as even expressly provided by Section 83 of the Electoral Act, is purely within the purview and powers of the political party, and ordinarily the court shouldn't interfere except in very few circumstances. But that is fundamentally different from the power of INEC to regulate activities, which borders on submitting your voters list and all of that. I think INEC is concerned about some of these activities because it helps them in regulating the activities of political party. Internal affairs borders on what the political parties and their members, including their leadership, do. But submitting voters membership registers and some other issues borders on INEC being properly footed on who actually constitutes a particular political party, who are members of a party, who should even agitate certain rights. INEC need to know, because you shouldn't have a situation whereby non-members of a political party are either presented as candidates or non-members of the political party begin to drag INEC on matters that have to do with the parties that they are not even members. Because
but shouldn't that be an exclusive preserve of political parties to know who their members are?
But INEC, at the end of the day, there is an interface between political parties and INEC in the electioneering process. And that interface also demands that INEC should have an idea as to who are members of a political party.
We have to thank you so much. We thought we could have got more from you, but the huge traffic didn't allow us. But the little we got is good enough. Salifu Oguche Usman, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me. My apologies, please.
It happens. Thank you so much for joining us today. We'll return on Monday with another edition. On behalf of my colleagues, my name is Amit Chanapo. Enjoy your weekend.